And anytime we saw something that, oh, this is for the Mollies, this is for the Mollies, we pulled stuff together. We built racks, and when the girls came in for their fittings, we were able to pull looks together that were individual enough for each character, but still represented the Molly look.
I'm very excited to talk about this movie with you, Patti. I watched it last night, and it was just such a joyride from start to finish. What about the script or the concept as a whole really sparked your interest to want to be a part of it?
The script was fantastic for starters. The nod to the '80s absolutely was what drew me in. I grew up in the '80s, so I really wanted to work with some of the things that I remembered. I remember myself wearing, friends wearing, and I wanted to do it again.
Whose costume based on the script were you most excited to help get to put together first?
First was definitely the Jamie costume, Kiernan's look, with the leather jacket, but also being able to have her look like the rocker that she was when she was going to the Totally Killer or to the concert that night, and then getting stuck in the time machine and popping out and being able to blend in well enough into the '80s that people didn't see her sticking out like a sore thumb. That was very, very key, very important. I think we pulled it off because, the rocker chicks were around back then, and they're here today too, right?
Definitely. I mean, I kept having flashbacks to like Stevie Nicks with her jacket in particular. So I thought it was a great little touch. Now, who would you say then was the most challenging character to develop a costume for?
I think it was not just one person. I think it was the three Mollies, or the four, I guess you could say, if you include Teen Pam in there. We had Tiffany, Pam, Marissa, and Heather. Yeah, made this last year, so I had to think about that for a minute. It was really, really important to me to pull. Well, of course, it was a pull to the Mean Girls, but we made them all look like the Mollies. And I wanted to do Molly's looks justice and do it correctly and pull all of these girls together. And you see them standing in the hallway. You see them even in the gym class, and Heather still has a little hat on her head. It wasn't a challenge. There was no challenges on this, but it was a lot of fun. How could I say it any better?
Fun little creative, again, not challenge, but creative drag for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Super creative. And I did a lot of picking, started in Vancouver and headed all the way down to San Diego. Great vintage shops all the way along the way. And I hit the Rose Bowl flea market, one of the biggest flea markets in North America. And the '80s is out there. And anytime we saw something that, oh, this is for the Mollies, this is for the Mollies, we pulled stuff together. We built racks, and when the girls came in for their fittings, we were able to pull looks together that were individual enough for each character, but still represented the Molly look.
Now, I love when an actor is permitted that sort of creative collaboration with directors and costume designers to help figure out the look of their character. And so I'm curious what that process was like for you in talking with your actors, talking with Nanachka, and finding a good blend of what everybody wanted.
Oh, for sure. Definitely a collaborative project. I think it was very important, especially for Notch and myself. There's a fine line between character and caricature, I always say. And you have to pull back a little bit so that it's not too humorous and believable. And I think we pulled it off with our color palette for the '80s. We went with softer tones, pinks, lighter blues, light teals, the florals, the pearls, the preppy looks. We had to make sure that it was believable. And then when we flipped over to the Gen Z, we went with a color palette that was a little cooler, jewel tones, if you will, to differentiate, because a lot of the kids now are pulling from the '80s, they're pulling from the '90s, they're pulling from Y2K. So very, very important collaboratively, even with my background team, to make sure that they were dressing the background that played in the scenes in each era appropriately so that it was believable. Olivia and I had an interesting time in the fitting room because I just pulled in 4 racks and I let her start going through the racks and obviously she didn't live the 80s. And at one point I said to her, I'm having trouble reading you. And she was like, oh, it's just all so good. So we had a great time pulling looks together. And she'd go, yeah, I love this. Or, that maybe doesn't work as well. But I'm very open to making the actors and happy and comfortable, as well as producers, directors. Let's work on this together.
That's great. I love that every department can have that collaboration, not just actors or whatnot. Now, I also wanted to talk about the look of the killer in particular. I mean, the slasher genre is seeing so many iconic looks on killers throughout the years. I love the sort of Max Headroom style mask that he wears. How can you talk me through that development process of coming up with the look for him?
Tony Gardner built that mask, Tony Gardner of All Terrain and his team. And I had worked with him on Curse and Cult of Chucky in the past. So we're quite tight. We're good friends. And we sat down and discussed with Notch, of course, and the other producers, because we want this iconic look for this killer. We want him to be remembered like Freddy or Jason. You know what I mean? We want to add him to the list. So it wasn't just Max Headroom. There was some iconic actors that we pulled some looks from. I don't know if you noticed the jawline, the little earring, a little elbow in there, to bring a look that the audience was going to go, and remember. It was important for me to build a costume that flowed with him time traveling, something that was relevant to today, something that was relevant to the 80s. So what I did is I jumped back even further to the 50s and I pulled a silhouette from James Dean, his bomber jackets that he would wear, his dark denim jeans with the cuff rolled up. I gave the killer Red Wing boots, which, I think have been around since the turn of the century. Things that no matter where he time traveled to, he would fit in well. It was also important for me with the killer's look that there was a bit of texture given to that costume. So it wasn't just an all black look hiding in the bushes kind of thing. So the jacket was actually a navy bomber that had some sheen to it. So it caught bits of the light. The camera would catch bits shining off of it. And the mask really, really worked well to pull that whole look together. But the key part of that look that was the 80s, also contemporary, is a lot of kids are wearing T-shirts that they're pulling from the racks from the 80s or from their parents' closets, right? So the T-shirt that he was wearing was a nod to Don Johnson in Miami Vice. We created our own little logo. So there's a guy leaning against a sports car, a vintage car with the palm tree and the sunset in the background. And we just dressed it a little bit, worked collaboratively with the art department, graphic designer, and Notch to come up with a look that is going to be memorable. And people are going to go, oh.
I love that.
That makes sense? Good.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I definitely, even down to the graphic tee, I was like, I don't see killers wear graphic tees in movies. So that's kind of a cool little twist. Now, one thing, in mentioning that the time travel and finding the right look for him is that when it comes to a whodunit style slasher, there's, you have to hide that mystery of who it is until, it comes time to reveal. How did that factor into your process in creating this costume? It's easy enough to hide, gloves and the mask, but how did you go about, making sure that was still kept secret?
Well, it was definitely the silhouette of the look, and it had to work with whoever was wearing the costume at any given moment, right? Whether it be a stunt performer or I don't want to give any spoiler alerts here. The eventual killer and, Chris Dubasage with his touring group of podcast people in the beginning. It was just important that the silhouette and the cut was going to work on a variety of people. But like you said, the gloves were very important to hide things. And Tony and I talked about the mask coming down far enough that the costume could come up. We did put a hoodie on him for layers also, so that you couldn't really tell if the person was slight or if they were a bit bigger built. And I think it worked.
I definitely agree, because that's something that I always kind of keep an eye out for after the Scream franchise now, and slashers like this is what's the build like? Do they look like
Yeah.
that person or do they look like that person? So I think you did a
Right.
great job because I couldn't tell who it was for the whole movie.
Excellent.
Um,
Excellent.
and we've got reviews coming out now for the movie. They've
Mhm.
seemed to be very positive, which I'm very happy for now that I've seen the movie. How are you
I'm
feeling?
thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled. This was a fun project that I was extremely excited to be invited to participate in. And my work is being appreciated. The entire team's work is being appreciated. But overall, this crew, this cast, bring it on again. A lot of fun.
Before I let you go for my final question,
Mm-hmm.
one thing I find so interesting about designing when it comes to horror movies is that they often have to get beat up as, as as people get hurt
Really?
and stabbed and whatnot. And so, what is that like for you? Putting together these great ensembles and then having to see them get thrown through the ringer half the time in the movie.
That's okay because I had 8 to 10 of each costume. I think the killer, we even had 12 of them, maybe. Yeah, we either built them or we found them in retail stores. But it was very, very important to have multiples, and so that if we had to start over again, we could.
I'm glad you had that much, and who knows, maybe they'll find their way back onto shelves somewhere and continue into another filmmaker's collection. So, but
I hope so.
either way, I'm really happy with this movie. I'm so glad to have gotten to talk with you, and I can't wait to spread the word. So, thank you so much.